On the clock. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Comic Arts Workshop. My name is Ramon Gill. I am your host and organizer. We've been doing this since 2017. We try to have this at least once a month, but lately it's been twice a month because we've just had so many awesome guests and I didn't want to push them back till too further out. So tonight we have with us Mr. Jameson. Is it Roar or Roarer?
Roar like a lion.
Roar like a lion. So Jameson Rohrer is our guest tonight. Jameson is a librarian, but that's all I'm going to say. I'm going to let him introduce himself. So take it away, Jameson.
All right. So again, my name is Jameson Rohrer. I'm a librarian for a library in Northern California. I'm not going to say which one because I'm not technically doing this for work. But I love being a comics librarian. It's one of the things that really brings me a lot of joy in life. So just a background on my education, I have a history degree from the University of Southern Indiana. And then I have a Master of Library and Information Science from San Jose State University. Graduated in 2013. So, wow, 11 years ago now. For me, I read comics growing up, but not extensively. I read Garfield comics and I would read some of the daily cartoons in the newspaper because we got the daily newspaper at home and I was able to read those. But for me, it was mostly comic strips is what I grew up reading. And in terms of how I became a librarian in general, I got a job at the local public library in Indiana, where I'm from. Got a job there as a junior in high school and have been working in libraries since. So this month is hitting my 20-year mark total in libraries, which is really cool to say. I just asked my boss at the time what it takes to be a librarian and followed that pathway. And I was in the middle of my last semester actually and moved to California for a job and ended up being a California State Prison librarian for 7 years, which led to some really cool opportunities, which I'll go into here. Because it's a correctional setting, there's a lot of things you can't do, but also at the same time, there's a lot of things you can do because you're essentially the subject matter expert. You're the person who knows what a library works, how it functions. And so because of that, we were able to do some really cool programming. So we were able to do a summer reading program. We're actually able to do a graphic novel book club in prison, comics art contest, excuse me. And these opportunities for me led to some pretty cool stuff. I got published in a reference textbook. And then I also got to present at state and national library conferences because working with that population is few and far between in terms of when you hear about successes. So it was really cool to speak about that. In terms of how I became to this position now, I think the big springboard for that is the Graphic Novel and Comic Roundtable, which was founded by the American Library Association. And it's a great way to get involved, and it only costs $15, which is really great, and you get a lot of stuff for $15. But it's the National Library Organization devoted to comics advocacy and making sure that comics are a relevant item in library collections and they're not just delegated to the kids section.
Hey, Jameson, when you say $15, that's for the overall ALA membership or that just for the graphic novel committee membership?
Just for the graphic novel committee. I'm not sure in terms of individuals, if you're not a librarian, what it would cost, but in terms of just the graphic novel committee, yeah, it's only $15. And I'm pretty sure I have to look at it how they structure it, but I think for anyone who is a non-librarian, it would be relatively cheap. There may not be much of a fee beyond that $15, which is really cool. That led to working with the Graphic Novel Roundtable. They started a best graphic novels for adults, which is my jam. 2020 and 2021, I was able to work on that when they first brought that on, and it's still ongoing, which is really great. And that led me, to a lot of networking connections, including Ramon. I've met a lot of people through the various library conferences and different things that I've attended over the years. And because of that has led to further opportunities in my current position where I'm a librarian for a large public library in Northern California. I created a virtual graphic novel club specifically for adults called Grownups Unite. It started in March of 2021 and it's still going strong. I don't currently run it anymore. We had a plethora of virtual author visits, which is really great, especially in that format. It provides authors and creators an opportunity to meet with readers and library staff and don't have to leave your home whatsoever. So it's a great opportunity. From there, I was happy to, know the right people and the right timing. And I was able to be an Eisner Award Judge for San Diego Comic-Con in 2022. Jackie Estrada, thankfully gave me the opportunity, and once in a lifetime. If you ever feel like you're someone who really should be an Eisner judge, just feel free to send Jackie a message. She's very approachable, but it's a wonderful once in a lifetime experience where you get to essentially read hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of comics in a bunch of different categories and really highlight and celebrate all the stuff that's being published out there.
I've actually known Jackie since the 90s because I used to submit they publish, like, if you send an artwork for the program book, you can get published in the program book, and she used to be in charge of the program book back then.
That's good to know. So in my current position, there's really four main things that I do as a comics librarian. That's not my official title with my employer, but I consider myself a comics librarian because a lot of the things I do are comics and graphic novel centered. The first thing I do is collection development. So I assess our community interests. I look at our data and circulation numbers. I look at the demographics of the people that actually live in our service area, trends in publishing. And I also look at the entertainment and or educational value of comic books. That's something that a librarian is really, really good at. And something else that I actually really get to, that I love to do that I actually don't get to do in terms of the practical side is metadata and cataloging standards. Something I'll go into in a few minutes, but being able to provide subject headings and information about your comic and how it can fit into a library catalog. So when people are doing searches, your items come up in those said searches. My second thing that I get to do in my current position, what we call user education. So I do conduct workshops and programs where we educate patrons. That's what we call people who visit the library about comics and graphic novels, helping them understand the diversity of the medium and that comics have real merit. They're not just, visual stories for children. And then we also help people navigate the comics and graphic novel collections that we do have, because oftentimes people are confused. Some libraries, including my own, depending on the series, we will catalog sometimes by the name of the series or the character. Sometimes it's by the author. So it really kind of depends. And the public generally doesn't understand why we do that, but that's totally okay. The third thing I do currently in my position is advocacy, pure and simple. I also like to do this with addressing skepticism from parents or even additional library staff who may feel like that comics and graphic novels are not a valuable resource that the community needs to have access to for literacy, entertainment, and education. And then I also work with, especially with teachers. A lot of teachers are reluctant to use comics and graphic novels in the classroom, but that's one of the barriers I help break down is actually I'll meet them in person. I'll meet with them over Zoom like this. We do some programs at the schools as well, and we have those opportunities to have conversations with the teachers and the administration and getting them into more of the classrooms.
I'm surprised there's still teachers and librarians who are still skeptical about comics.
It's surprising, but it's still fairly common, unfortunately. But it's one of those things. And then lastly, the last thing I get to do in my current position that I kind of touched on is programming and events. So like this next May, I'm actually already scheduled a free comic book day program for our library where we're going to have local comic creators come in and speak. We're going to have a live draw demonstration, and we're going to really indicate to more of a teen and adult focus, but what are the careers and pathways available to people in having careers within the comic industry. And then with that advocacy, I am starting a adventure called Comics for All with an X and the number 4. And it's essentially going to be an advocacy group. Potentially, I might do some kind of a podcast involved, a YouTube channel. But for me, it's one of my pathways of providing advocacy for comic creators, big and small, indie, self-publishing, all of the above, just because I love comic books so much and I feel like they deserve to be on library shelves. And with that, I've got a couple different places that I'm going to be at. The one I know I'm going to is Fan Expo San Francisco at the end of this month, which is really exciting. I've submitted panels for Emerald City Comic Con, WonderCon, and more than likely I'll probably submit a panel, probably with Ramon actually, for San Diego Comic Con. But there's a lot of opportunities to work with comics libraries.
They eliminate themselves as soon as they say something, which works fine for me. I was ready to like delete them. We've been getting like trolls every once in a while. It's really annoying.
It does happen.
Yeah. So anyways, thank you for that. And thank you for considering me for a panel discussion in San Diego. I haven't been applying for my professional badge every year now because I'm not sure if I'm gonna go or not.
Right.
But anyway, so it's not on my list of questions, but you mentioned it, so let me ask you now. Why is it important that authors or comic book creators have the right metadata? And you mentioned something else. Descriptions, was it?
Yeah, just metadata and subject headings are kind of the two interchangeable terms, but essentially it's the keywords or the words that people use when they're searching for items, especially when they don't know if they have the right author or the right title. So a good example would be um, we could have science as a topic. We could have science 20th century. We could have superhero, comics, graphic novel, all kinds of different descriptors. Basically, words that describe the content of the graphic novel or the comic in terms of what it's talking about, its characters, its setting, its time period, its language. All those pieces of information are really helpful, especially when we catalog them and add them to a library collection, because those are the search terms that generally people actually use, because people oftentimes are looking, they don't have a specific title or even an author in mind, and they use those search terms to find things. And if your comic book has those subject headings attached, then when people do those searches, voila, your work shows up in those searches.
And what's metadata?
Metadata is basically the application of those subject headings to the record on the back end. And the nice thing about the metadata is you can make it as specific or as general as you like. So, for
And
example,
how does an author tell a library what its subject headings or metadata are?
that's a good question. So there's a couple ways you could do that. One is you could visit just your local public library, pull up some items, and they're always going to have those subject headings. And if they don't, shame on them. But those subject headings should be available on the record. And then a second avenue is, like I've mentioned to Ramon before, is called worldcat.org. It's a wonderful website. Basically, it's a global database of libraries in terms of their holdings. And that will provide really, really detailed subject headings as well. So you can pull up an item, say you pull up, I don't know, what's a monstrous,
Let's say as a comic creator, how do I communicate to the library that these are my subject headings and these are my metadata?
I'd say the best way is, especially if you're emailing directly or you're selling to them, provide that in writing if you can. Attachments, or just, hey, these are the descriptions that we're going to have. And if you have, especially because a lot of libraries, what they do, they call copy cataloging. They'll take a catalog record from a public library that already has said item and just basically copy verbatim the subject headings, everything, and that generally comes from the publishers. So if you're a creator and you're doing a lot of direct sales and direct contact with libraries and other entities like that, the best way to do that is actually try to provide those on your own. And that's where myself and other comics librarians can come in. We can assist you in identifying all the different subject headings and or metadata that you may need, because a lot of those times those breaking down those subjects doesn't come naturally a lot of time. Like, science 20th century, that doesn't really come to mind necessarily when you're searching, but that's just one way of providing the avenues of getting that information to the staff who are going to be cataloging. But ultimately, I think working with a librarian, especially if you can, and using the resources, like I said, WorldCat and other libraries, to see what subject headings are being used for, especially if you have a title that's similar to your own, then you should be able to even just almost verbatim copy those subject headings if there's a lot of similarity in content.
So let me get it straight. So I'm a self-publisher.
Mm-hmm.
I contact the library and I say, hey, here's my book. And when I propose or suggest that they carry my book, I include that information, the subject, the subject headings and the metadata, so that if they say yes, we want to carry it, it'll be easier because you've already given them that information. They don't have to type it up themselves or figure out by reading the book what it's about. Because I can imagine if a library is considering hundreds of books, a week or a month or whatever, having to type up the metadata and the subject headings is going to be a source of friction or a barrier for them to add your book to their collection.
Absolutely. And it really comes down to time management, because a lot of the time doing that is very time consuming. and what they call original cataloging, which most catalogers don't want to do because it takes a lot of extra time. So yeah, like what you just said, Ramon, a great example. If you can provide that information when you're submitting information to a library or someone who's in charge of acquiring library titles, that is the best thing you can do. It doesn't guarantee necessarily that they're going to purchase it, but it helps make the decision, I think, a little bit easier for them because, hey, no, not we don't have to create this additional stuff. Or like a good example for us, we have a local author collection. So in an instance where a local author can provide those things, we can actually put them in a totally separate section and highlight them too. So that's something else a lot of libraries like to do is local authors, which is great.
Okay. Now, why do you think that as graphic novelists or comic book creators, that we should be trying to get our books into libraries?
Oh, that is an excellent question. I guess the why and I guess kind of the how together. I say just size matters. So single issues, unfortunately, I lost in a little. I'm framing this in a public library sense. Single issues in public libraries generally don't go together. There are a few examples, where they more have like a zine collection, and they'll kind of have zines and single issue comics kind of intertwined. But by and large, public libraries want a trade paperback or a hardcover collected edition. Those are the formats that we generally will collect because it's got to hold up to circulation. It's got to hold up to being checked out, being dropped in a box, being open and closed a lot. There are exceptions, like I said, mainly special collections, archives, and academic libraries may have a bit more of a focus on single issues. But again, local author collections, I know like in our local author collection, we do have some single issue comics. So there are multiple pathways to get titles and information to the collections. It's just a matter of which format are you trying to focus on, the single issues or more of the trade collected editions. Find a distributor if you can. I know that is definitely a challenge for a lot of small creators, but if you can get onto one of those, because libraries unfortunately are fairly inflexible in terms of how they acquire things. A good example is like my library. We're a pretty large library, but we cannot directly order from a small independent comic publisher. They just don't have the means to do it. They don't have a company credit card. They can't do purchase orders, which is really sad because there's a lot of great opportunities for direct sales from publishers and creators. And I think that will change over time. But right now, libraries are still very inflexible in terms of how they acquire items. So if you can find a distributor, Diamond, Penguin Random House, Simon & Schuster, Baker & Taylor, Ingram, any of those, or maybe even the smaller ones that libraries use to obtain local materials or local publishing materials. From the next tip I have here is making connections, network, visit libraries in your area, introduce yourself in person and or through their contact page, kind of like Ramon said. If you're just going to send information in, hey, this is my title, I'm an author who lives fairly close to the area. A lot of libraries do have local author events and collections, and these can often lead to some direct sales and other opportunities. Something else I wrote down here. So every state library does have an association and a conference of some kind. Find out when that is. My one in California, we're for the first time this next year, in October next year, we're actually going to have an artist alley. We've never had one, like, which just kind of blows my mind. Ramon was at ALA, and the artist alley and the comics representation was off the charts. It was the largest I'd ever seen, and it was a great influx of comics and visual creation within the greater library market. And it was wonderful to see.
I'm actually going to the Connecticut Library Association conference in April.
Hey,
They don't have an artist alleys, but I asked them about it, and I said, "Well, you can have we can give you a nonprofit rate for that." So
there you go.
I'll take it.
Absolutely. And then for digital, that's a whole other avenue of getting materials into libraries. So there's a couple different ways to do that, and we can go into that. So a lot of it is high resolution scans. The one vendor that doesn't use high resolution scans is Hoopla. I don't know why they don't, but it just bugs me. So a few of those: Global Comics, Libby, Hoopla, and Comics Plus is one of the newer ones. But Comics Plus is really nice because it's read on demand. There's no wait list where like Libby can have a wait list on items. So this is an opportunity for creators such as yourselves to release single issues more in the digital format because the digital platforms seem to be more open to that type of thing. But I've noticed, at least through my own browsing, that if there are single issues in there, it's usually a grouping of 3 to 4, so a story arc of some kind, not just pure single issues. Unless it's a one-shot standalone story, by and large, it's got to be a group. So age groups. Oh no, sorry. What did I put here? A million people.
Let me
Okay,
ask you
so
this one here. Let me ask you
sure.
this. Um, does that when a library is interested in a book, right? Is it more common that each library will order a copy, or is it more common that one person orders books for all the branches?
That is an excellent question. It can vary between the libraries. A good example, like my library, even though we have 28 branches, we have one singular person who orders everything for youth and one person for adult. But they are very open to suggestions. So I can send them suggestions of titles that they haven't ordered or they overlooked because they themselves are actually not a comics reader. They've admitted this, and that's totally fine. But that's where myself and other staff come in and provide those recommendations. I got Ramon's book right here, actually. We got it in the collection, which is great. So that's a lot of the times too is finding connections to people who use libraries and saying, hey, make a person suggestion on my behalf. I'd love to get my comic in there, or what. There's other ways to do it too. 3 to 4 seem to be. Oh, age groups. So this is something that I haven't got to talk about a lot yet, but in terms of library world, there's 4 distinct age reading groups especially for comics and graphic novels. And this also is reflected in awards like the Eisner Awards break it down in these age groups and other awards too. So you have 4 to 7-year-olds. Generally, the 0 to 3 age group is babies, and there are a lot of visual books and board books already out there. That's just a category I wouldn't really pursue very much. However, the 4 to 7-year-old age group is a really a age group that is a huge reading group. They check out tons and tons and tons of comics and graphic novels. Then you have 8 to 12-year-olds, what we call tweens. So these are the kids that have been reading comics and graphic novels and are now getting to that middle school age group. And there are so many things being published out there right now for them, and it's wonderful to see. Teens and then adults. So when you're creating stories or intellectual properties, especially if you're really trying to reach the library market, think about trying to reach at least one, if not 2 of these groups. Because a good example is we have a lot of comics in our collections that are, I would say, for teen and adult. Now, there are some content areas that obviously separate them, but by and large, there's a lot of titles that we catalog in teen, but are totally appropriate for adults to read too. So then same goes for the other way. We have titles that are geared toward the younger crowd, the 4 to 7-year-olds, but 8 to 12-year-olds can totally read it too. So there's the ways you can, when you're crafting stories and crafting, properties, think about how a wider age group can access that material. And again, find library panels and events at comic conventions. They're happening more and more. You're going to see more librarians and more libraries themselves at comic conventions. Like one of the great things at San Diego Comic-Con I love, the San Diego Public Library is there every single year, and they're doing things. They're partnering with artists to make unique library cards with artwork. They're creating one-off posters. They're doing all kinds of stuff. And they're also on panels. They have a full day of panels on education programming and using comics and educational formats. In terms of, I'm just going to roll into one of these next questions, Ramon. So kind of like,
Go ahead.
what are some other things that you would advise comic creators and graphic novelists to do in regards to working with libraries, and why is it so important? The first thing I like to say is obviously be patient. We have a lot going on a lot of the time. We're pretty much understaffed always. So libraries can be slow in responding. So keep that in mind. Find opportunities to work with us. I gave a couple of examples like free comic book day, live draw events, library cons, author visits, local author showcases, workshops for how to make comics for kids. The possibilities are really endless. If you can incorporate art and literacy together, you're pretty much golden, because that's ultimately what libraries are looking for most of the time. I kind of mentioned this before, but visit your local library, get a library card, and use it. Check out their physical and digital comics and all their platforms. Find out how they make purchase suggestions and use it. So that's a good example, especially if they have they don't have your own title and it's available. Go ahead and suggest your own title to be purchased. That'd be great. I love hearing we have a couple authors who have submitted their own works, and now they're in our local author collection. Again, kind of going into the special collections, like that's one of the things we're trying to focus on in our special collections, like History Archive, is getting published works from really local authors that have lived in the area, who our acquisitions person doesn't want to purchase a copy for the collection that the public can check out. However, because it has redeeming quality, because the person is a local person who lives in the area and has published something, we want to keep it in that special collections and making sure it's accessible for everyone. Now, that doesn't mean it can be checked out necessarily, but it's available for everyone to view. And at some point, we also want to digitize those as well. But that, again, that digital component also becomes down to copyright, and it comes down to the creator and what their preferences are too. If the goal is to reach the library market for sales, collected editions, as I mentioned, it's where it's at. That's where libraries are going to want things.
What does that mean, collected edition?
Anything that's basically not a single issue. So like yours is a good example. Anything that's bound, that's more than a single issue. Now, if you have a standalone that maybe is published in this format, there's a good chance that libraries will probably publish it. But single issues, I don't have any floppies with me, no. But single issues, they just don't hold up, and they're too delicate. They just don't hold up, especially with children. They'll just demolish it in one or two checkouts. But we're always looking for ways to help break down those barriers, and we know that single issues are definitely one of the things that comics is still very known for. But unfortunately, it's just something that libraries won't generally pursue because of the fragility of the material. Let's see here. So two things we can focus on. Many libraries, like myself, we're expanding our comics programs and events because we realize the number of people checking out materials and comics and graphic novels is up, and up. It's at least in our library system, the checkouts of comics to regular novels is almost 4-1, which is really, really great information, because that tells you that comics and graphic novels are the hot materials that are being checked out. Regular novels, they're being checked out, but 4-1, at least in my library system, a large metropolitan system, we're checking out comics and graphic novels 4-1. Now, again, that's a little skewed because it includes teens, children, and adults. But that just goes to show you that the circulation, the data doesn't lie. People are reading comics, graphic novels, manga at a very high rate. One thing we're working on, donating original artwork or signed books for library fundraisers. That's something we love to do. I got a couple of those last year where a creator signed a couple books, and we were able to give those away as bingo prizes. We were able to give them away at different things like that too. Participating in library comic conventions or comic art festivals. My library hasn't done one yet, but there are libraries nearby, not too far from us, that just did their 8th library con and had 8,000 people show up for a library convention. I mean, it was pretty big. Advocating for comics and graphic novels as valuable resources. These are items that need to be in the collection. We want your books in our collections. And a lot of the times it's kind of breaking through that distribution barrier. And for me, that's a huge issue that libraries need to really address, because there's so many direct sales opportunities that are lost and are just never found, because we only can focus a lot of the time on acquiring things from the big distributors. Let's see here. So I have the next thing I have is importance of creator and library partnerships, kind of why they're important. They help introduce new readers to comics and graphic novels. That's what the library, a lot of our focus is trying to get people to read comics and graphic novels who may not have before, who may be reluctant or may have that skeptical view that they're only for children and that they're just picture books. We also help position libraries as key resources for comic fans and creators themselves. we also want to have you coming to our libraries to utilize and check out materials on illustration, starting a small business, those types of things as well. We want you coming in to use the library. And if we don't have those materials, let us know, because we want people, in all walks of life to be successful and have successful businesses. And there's a lot of libraries, especially more on the East Coast, that will have sections on creating small businesses and entrepreneurship. And it's really cool to see.
Hey, James,
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm already past the halfway. I'd like to open up to questions from the audience.
Sure.
But before that, let me just ask you a very self-serving question. So my book is on about 6 library systems or libraries already. When I looked at WorldCat, right? And yet, when I've gone to libraries and shown them my book, they can't find it in the system. Why do you think that is?
Interesting. I wonder, because
they're not looking at WorldCat. They're looking at what are they looking at that they're not finding my book? Could they be looking at, like, I think I approached a library in California, and he said doesn't seem to be available in any libraries in California, even though, well, it was before you probably put it in the Sacramento library,
right?
Even though it's available in Arizona, in Ohio, and so do their systems not always check if there's already an entry in other states?
I think so. Yeah, I know. California, for whatever reason, there's a lot of libraries that are not on WorldCat. And actually, my library, we're going to be being added this next year. Even though we're a large library system, our holdings are not listed on there, which is unfortunate. In terms of the libraries not being able to find it, I'm assuming what they're looking for is a system called Link Plus, which is basically a consortium of libraries that share physical materials. And I'm assuming what they're doing is they're looking on there for this. And yes, that is true. I was not able to find this on that, but now this will be actually one holding because we're listed on there. But that's a good question. I'm not sure why, because on WorldCat, especially, I do the ISBN search on WorldCat because that's specific to this edition, and that shows up results. So and it's really sad to me if the librarian doesn't know how to use WorldCat, because that's a very basic tool that we we know how to use. But yeah, I'm really
not going to ask a librarian, don't you know how to use WorldCat?
Yeah. You should.
So anyways, let me open this up to the rest of the audience. If anybody has any questions,
sure.
Now's the time to ask. Jay, go ahead.
Can you hear me okay? Okay. When you were talking about, well, thanks for being on here. When you were talking about doing a lot of the panels and touring to the different Comic-Cons and doing, like, that's not part of your job as a librarian, and you're doing a lot of that on your own dime. Is that semi-correct?
Yes, for the most part. Like this last year, the American Library Association happened to be in San Diego, which was in state, and it was a wonderful experience. But yeah, by and large, the library system will not pay me to go. But this next year, more than likely, they're actually going to send me to WonderCon on company dime for the first time, because a lot of libraries are finally starting to see the acknowledgement and the accessibility of these conventions and how important they are. At least in my administration, they really understand, at least trying to breaking down those barriers of trying to get past the distribution level and direct sales. And to me, that's where it comes in. And doing that on my own a little bit here and there is worth it, because that's a huge barrier that is stopping a lot of comics from being added to library collections. And being able to do that is just really important to me. And if I'm spending some money doing it, great. But I know at some point, because I am, like I said, mentioned starting the Comics for All, and I may end up creating an LLC and using that as tax write-offs, going to comic conventions in some form like that. So
yeah,
but yeah, there's a lot of opportunity, especially in the conventions across the country. I want to see even more library representation, because if the panels provide us a great chance to work with creators and to have them showcase and celebrate their works. And then it also, just that networking capability is really important too. But for me, I think it's an important thing, just because libraries need to hear from the creators, because oftentimes we're stuck in our physical libraries. We don't get to go out very often. And so being able to spend time with creators where they actually are, not asking them to physically come to the library all the time, is really, to me, it's a sign of genuineness, because we want your materials, and if we're taking the time and the energy to spend time with you where comic conventions are, and having a library presence and a focus there, to me that just shows that how important you guys are to what we do.
Nice.
Any other questions, guys?
Yeah.
Oh, I have a question.
Okay, Char, go ahead.
Do you plan using AI comic books? AI generated comic books in your library?
That is an excellent question. I don't think a lot of libraries have actually approached this yet. AI generated art is definitely a concern in terms of creativity and publishing and copyright and trademark. And I know there's been a couple instances of the bigger publishers. I think it was Simon and Schuster, where the cover artist on a novel had to completely redesign it because it turned out that their design was AI generated, and it was pretty easy to tell. That's going to be harder to tell as time goes on, as AI gets stronger and more developed. But I think libraries definitely are cognizant of AI and its kind of limitations of where it is, and the damaging effects it can have on creators and people who create things for a living. But that's a great question. I think libraries are definitely aware of it, but I don't think we have necessarily a lot of formal things in place to ensure that we're not ordering and making and adding those things to our collections without even noticing, if that makes sense.
I think right now a lot of the publishers that we've had on this show have said flat out that they're not going to use AI art in any of their books. So it really depends on which publishers, I guess, you order from books.
Absolutely.
Right. So if it's a publisher that doesn't use AI art, then there's not going to be any AI art. But great question, Char. Thank you very much.
That was a really good question.
So Greg's next. Go ahead.
Yeah. As you were talking about especially single issues and that, I was wondering, I remember how Lulu transformed the publishing print-on-demand industry, 20, 30 years ago? And I'm kind of wondering, there is waterproof, tear-proof pages in that. If somebody was able to create a service that could create those single issues in a format that would be resistant, do you think the libraries might be more open to taking single issues?
Yes, actually, I think that's a really good component. If the material, like you're saying, is a bit more sturdy and can hold up to being checked out, absolutely. I know in my library, that's the number one reason why they won't order single issues, because the fragility and just kind of how delicate they are. But if they are a bit more sturdy and kind of have that more kind of this feel to it, where it just kind of has that bendy trade paperback feel, then yeah, I think that would increase the chances a lot. I can't say how much, but it would definitely, librarians won't pause as often as hey, oh, this is a single issue, but oh, well, the print quality is good. So yeah, let's go ahead.
Yeah, I'm thinking there's a lot of books that are designed for babies, and and it's that type of thing, and it just, as long as it looks good, I think. And it's just something that came out. You don't know of anybody doing that currently, to your knowledge, though?
Not to my knowledge. I know there are publishers out there, like Fair Square Graphics, for example, they release single issues and they're bound like this.
Yeah.
Like this. And so I think single issues in that format will do very well. I can't say how often libraries are collecting those, but at least in the libraries that I've worked in, it would definitely increase the chances of them being added for sure.
Yeah, I'm just thinking a saddle stitching would be better than like those books, because as they get used a lot, the pages start falling out from the glue. Yeah.
I think the only drawback about saddle stitching, Greg, is that you don't have a spine to print the title on.
Right.
So that's true.
If it's shelved on the book, like vertically or sideways,
yep,
it's not gonna, people aren't gonna see it.
Yeah.
But then again, there's a lot of children's picture books that are like that, and they still stock them. So
right.
maybe it might not be an issue.
And like our library is, I would say, pretty, what's the word, expansive. That we don't do single issues, but we have like Braille books. We've got self-published books that are like you mentioned, the print on demand stuff. So
Yeah.
our I think we're doing a pretty good job of trying to find the non-traditional stuff that's just not just all the big publishers and things you can find through all the big distributors, which is nice. And unfortunately, like I mentioned, my people who acquire everything are not comics readers, which is made that very loud and clear, which is fine. But it's really nice when I bring them information and materials they actually listen to, because they realize that there are just things they don't see. Because they're looking for so many materials as it is, there's a lot of titles they may miss, there's a lot of things they may oversee, and a lot of the times they actually don't get to go to conferences themselves. They're just stuck acquiring and just looking for titles constantly, and that luckily they get paid to do that. I'd love to do that, but I think there's a lot of opportunity for creators, like you said, to find kind of that middle ground. Like, hey, if we can't do a single issue, but if we bounded it this way, would you be interested? And I think absolutely that's a pathway to pursue.
Okay. And I think also, I think it was when Moni was here, I think we talked about libraries love hardback editions.
Oh yes, we love hardback editions. I mean, the trade paperbacks are great. And by and large, we'll buy them because they're cheaper for us to buy and for you guys to produce. But I mean, right now I have my phone on a stack of about 20 Marvel Omnibus editions. But yeah, the paperbacks are really great because they're easy, they're light. But in terms of, we're going to buy more copies if they're the hardcover edition, is because we want that hardcoverness. They look really nice on the shelf. They hold up longer. And if there's any spine damage, we have actually a chance to repair it. Whereas on a paperback, by and large, we can't repair them because there's nothing to put like on top of them. Whereas the hardcover, we have opportunities to help with their longevity, if that makes sense.
Really off the topic question. Would that librarian specialize? Are there librarians who just fix the books? That's their only job is to fix the books?
Yes and no. When I worked at a very small library, yes, they had literally one person dedicated to all that. Now the big library I work at, generally because we have so much money necessarily, if it's a questionable repair, we'll just go ahead and buy a new edition. Essentially, if it's I don't know what the time consuming like barrier is, but they feel like if it's going to take more time to repair it than just go ahead and order a new one, we'll just order a new one, which is great. So, and that's something I really like because we've been able to kind of refresh a bunch of series. We've been able to fill in gaps of series, like we have all of the Sandman, but volumes 2, 3, and 4, we only had one copy left because they've been out for so long and been damaged and never returned.
I think Omar had a question, right?
Yes. Ramon and Jameson, if you guys are cool, I have 3 questions, but they can all be answered yes or no. So very short answers.
Sure.
Question 1: If the local library,
Nothing. Go ahead.
If the local library doesn't have money to buy my book, or the book's not acquirable through a distribution, can they just take it as a donation?
That's a great question. That is going to entirely depend on every single library. Unfortunately, like my library, even though we're a large system, even if somebody brings in a brand spanking new copy, they won't take it as a donation, which is really unfortunate. However, we'll take it as a local author copy.
Okay.
We'll take it if we have like a special collections archive, especially if you live in the area, we'll add it there. But by and large, no, they won't budge on that for whatever reason.
Can I answer that question too?
Yeah.
So I've tried to do that several occasions, and I get different responses. Just Jameson was right. Every library is different, right? And what I learned was that some libraries won't accept books unless they meet certain criteria, and one of the criteria is that they're professionally reviewed.
Yep, that's a big one.
Libraries require that they be reviewed by 2 professional organizations,
which I personally disagree with.
So I actually paid for mine to be reviewed by Kirkus and by Publishers Weekly. And so whether or not that moved the needle and why libraries are now carrying my book, or some libraries are carrying, I'm not sure. But because I was able to say yes, if it's been professionally reviewed, I think that has helped my cause of getting my books in libraries.
Absolutely.
Number two, when I approached the Brooklyn Public Library, they said that actually there's an outside company that handles all our acquisitions for us.
Wow.
So I actually have to approach them. I have all their contact info, I just haven't done it. And they said they do it, the same company also does it for New York Public Library. New York City is weird that we actually have multiple library systems. Brooklyn has their own.
Yep. Same here.
Manhattan has their own. And I think Staten Island and the Bronx, I think are the same system. I don't know. But I know there's multiple systems within New York City itself. And the third thing is just what I notice, and I've used this a lot to my advantage, is that, you know which libraries will accept donated books? School libraries. Almost every school library that I've approached accepts the book and adds it to their collection. They don't seem to have as many barriers to getting their book into the collection. They just want books for their kids. So now it's different in the sense that, right, like I know when Sacramento and when DC ordered my books, they ordered a copy for every branch, right? When you approach one elementary school, then chances are they'll probably just want a donation just for their particular school.
Right.
So with the exception when I was able to donate my books to the Bronx school district. So every middle school in the Bronx has a copy of my book. So that was the exception. So school libraries are easier than regular libraries.
Mm-hmm.
And I would assume that libraries in small towns might be more open than libraries have systems with multi-branches.
Yeah, good example. Like my Sacramento, we're 28 libraries. The library I worked at before was only 2. And they were very open to adding donations. And we would, constantly get new donations, brand new items that were donated, but fit the collection. And we would add them continuously, almost on a regular basis. Where my large library system is, we've got 28 libraries and we don't order 28 copies of everything, which is unfortunate.
Any other questions, guys?
Yeah, I still had a couple more.
Go ahead. Sorry.
And feel free to
I
answer
have
these yes or
another one.
no.
Yeah, we'll let Omar finish. Sean, we'll go back to you, okay?
So will a library hosting a convention allow the creators to actually sell their books as part of the convention?
That is also a great question. That is going to be entirely dependent on the library and how they have it set up. I know the large library system I mentioned is Santa Clara City Library. They've done it for 8 years now. They do it on site, and I don't know exactly what their rules are in terms of selling materials. That's actually a good question. I need to find that out. But like the library I work in, we have a private galleria space where, because it is a private space, people can sell things. So a lot of the time, I think libraries will frame it in such a way or have a permit where, yes, you can sell items, but I can't say all of them are like that. But there's a good chance that if you do attend a library convention or a library con of some kind, that you will be able to sell things, but I can't say 100% certainty though.
I'll say this, Omar. I've organized a few conventions and I've also been in a few conventions. And in some place, and almost all of them you're allowed to sell, but in some places they will require that you have some kind of sales document, like a tax ID number.
Right.
And some places they don't care. So
Yep. All right, last quick question. So you mentioned various digital distributors that feed into the library system. Is Amazon Comixology one of them? My guess is no, but
no. And the reason is because Comixology doesn't provide a pathway for libraries to purchase an organizational account. It's just like an individual account and you can't share it, unfortunately. I would love to see Comixology kind of open that up, because I think that would be another opportunity for digital comics to reach us. But yeah, unfortunately, it's the way Comixology has set their accounts up that we can't get accounts for multiple readers. It's one individual accounts.
All right, I'm gonna work on that for you. I'm gonna see what I can do.
I,
over there.
I think also 'cause, like the Amazon publishing is not usually a vendor that libraries use either, right?
No, by and large, they're not, but we will. I've noticed like the create space, like the Amazon create space, we have titles from that in our collection. I've noticed that. Then Omar, I'm excited to be on a panel with you here in a couple weeks.
Okay, Charlie, you had a question, right?
Yep.
Do you often store banned comic books or banned books too?
Yes, actually, that is a really complicated but good question because there are a lot of libraries and a lot of states where this is a complicated thing because it oftentimes brings in state law, which is really fun. A lot of this is going to be dependent on each library's what they call a collection development policy. Basically, the formal writing that lists the criteria of what libraries use to determine to acquire things. Most of the time, banned items are specific to like an institution, like they're either banned from a school, they're banned from a prison, they're banned from specific areas because of their subject content. But in a public library, our ultimate goal is what this says: free people read freely. We do not want to censor, content as much as possible. There are obviously there are exceptions to that, like the Anarchist Cookbook. That's one that's made the rounds over the decades, where essentially it shows you how to make a homemade bomb. But yeah, so that's something we're not going to obviously promote, but you can still find it easily on the internet. But in terms of buying banned materials or kind of separating them, there are some libraries that will pull them aside for like an event or to celebrate banned comics. Like, hey, these are the ones that have been banned in schools, or these are the ones that have been banned in prisons, or internationally, this one can't be sold, and we'll highlight them. But by and large, we want those in there because we want people to have access to them. There are some states that have made it very restrictive and for schools and or public libraries to acquire these things, or they have to have them separated, or you have to have an adult present. Like a good example, I think it was in Idaho, where you now have to be 18 and older to even enter the library. You have to show your ID to get into the library, which that's a really bad level of censorship. So actually that's a really important topic because libraries we're in the crosshairs of making sure that banned materials are accessible. And that is, in physical or digital. And I know there are, like I mentioned, some states are making it really difficult to actually have those on the shelves and not, what's the word, verbally abused. People call, we had a librarian visit us. I think her name's Amanda Jones. She, a school librarian in Louisiana, and basically got, hounded and harassed out of the job because she believed in what they call intellectual freedom, is that everyone should have the right to read whatever they want, wherever they want, whenever they want. And banned materials, and to me, the thing I like to say is banning something because you personally don't like it is maybe one of the most un-American things you can do. Because you're essentially saying, the content of what you're reading, I don't like it, and nobody else should too. And that it doesn't fly with what actual intellectual freedom and censorship actually stands for and means. But it's coming. You're gonna see even more pushes for titles and or specific content areas like the LGBTQ stuff. You're definitely going to see more of those being pushed to the sidelines. But libraries, where we come in, is to make sure, especially if in the school libraries or prisons or other situations are being really affected, public libraries, our job is to step in and make sure that those are accessible. And there are some states where they're not able to, like Louisiana, I think, is one. Texas is one, where the state law kind of supersedes what you can do. And in some instances, library staff can even be incarcerated for certain things, which is really frightening. But great question, though. And I think something we need to keep very mindful of. And especially in comic book world, where censorship has been a thing for a long time, being able to have materials that people may not like. The good phrase is libraries have something to offend everyone. And I ultimately think that's really expressive and true. And we know we're not going to keep things obviously that promote, hate and violence, but we're going to have everything perspective you can possibly think of that is within the realm of civil discourse and, not promoting violence against other groups. And I think a lot of times that scares people because that, at the library, they're going to have all the perspectives and all the angles of looking at things. We can't have that because our narrative is the one that everyone's got to have. And that's just ultimately not right and not true. And libraries play a fundamental role in making sure those banned materials are accessible, even if that means like Brooklyn Public Library is a great example of they actually have shared a bunch of lists of items digitally that some states, like I think it was New Mexico, where they banned a bunch of books in the schools, and Brooklyn Public Library say, hey, New Mexico, here's all the materials that are banned in your schools. Come check them out through us digitally. And it's just a great example of how libraries promote the freedom to read, because that intellectual freedom component is very important to American society.
And getting back to what you said about Idaho making sure that you had to be 18. Now, it's always been my impression that library patronage is the biggest demographic are young people and then very old people.
Mm-hmm.
Right, and not as much in the middle. Like when you're in your 30s or 40s, you don't go to the library as often, but when you're a kid and when you're retired, you go to the library a lot more.
That's right. However, in terms of at least our foot traffic in our libraries, we're seeing more 20 and 30-year-olds for the first time in quite some time. We're not really sure why that is. I don't know if it's just changing demographics. People are looking for more things to do. But we're definitely I've been in libraries for 20 years, and you're right, that's an age group, the 20, 30, 40, early 40s. You don't see them. They're either digital readers, they only access the digital stuff, or they're so busy with their families and their careers, they don't have the time to come physically to the library. But I think there's avenues where we're providing an opportunity for people to learn about comics off-site. So we're actually doing more things out at community organizations, community partners, the state parks. We're doing stuff with them. So libraries are really, at least the ones that are caring enough, they are really trying to make a concerted effort in doing programs and events that are not at the library. And so being able to work with people like that would be great.
I have one more quick question, and then I'll
Sure.
see if the audience has any more, then we'll wrap it up. What is the most common, structure in terms of where who do libraries answer to and where they get their funding from? Is it usually like usually City Hall or the local city or township or whatever?
Yes,
don't they usually exert try to dictate policy for what the library can carry or not?
They can. It depends on again, this is kind of the weird library world where every library's jurisdiction and how they're supervised and managed kind of varies. Like a good example, the library I work for, we're considered what they call a joint powers authority. So we're actually city and county employees because the city and county library system is so large that it's together. Where I live is a very smaller library system, only 3 branches. However, the people who supervise the library are actually the county board of supervisors. And they don't really have any real say in terms of jurisdiction or policy, but they have say on the funding. And so the library funding, at least for us, is a combination. Most libraries are going to be a combination of local funds, so like city, county property taxes. You're also going to have some state funding in there. There's a lot of state grants and or state taxes that come into play. And then there's some libraries like ours that more of the bigger projects or things like that, we do get some federal money too. And then there are some libraries that I would love to see more libraries do this, is get involved with tax revenue. Like there's some libraries that are getting tied into the cannabis taxes. Why not? That tax is always there. And like a good example, Santa Barbara Public Library is the only one I know of in California where they've actually partnered with the dispensaries in the area, and a specific percent of the tax goes to the library. I can't say exactly how it was set up or worked, but I think libraries are unfortunately very afraid of pursuing that. But ultimately, it's tax money, and it's opportunity to provide more things to more people, more everywhere.
It always amazes me that libraries are able to stand up to bans and censorship, even though they are part of city government usually.
And it's the nice thing. It's sometimes it feels like the kind of the legal and the court side is not on our side, but ultimately it is, because that principle of the freedom to read whatever you want is a pretty powerful legal precedent. And
yeah,
once you get in a courtroom, oftentimes the people's being offended, it doesn't hold up. It just doesn't. And judges and people who actually, are actually in enforcing said law, they oftentimes it just becomes a frivolous lawsuit, and really it never goes anywhere. None of these cases, none of these censorship things have ever made the U.S. Supreme Court. I don't even know if they've made state Supreme Court anywhere. But it's not a precedent that is easy to set, I guess is the right way to say it.
Guys, any more questions before we wrap up? No more? Okay. I'm going to make a closing statement. I'm going to make a closing statement. It's not like we were just watching this binge watching this courtroom show. But anyways, I just wanted to share what my thinking is with libraries is that Jameson held up my book, The Whiz Kids from DARPA, book 1. And here's my thinking why I think libraries are very important. I am trying to get my book in as many libraries as possible, because what I think happens is when you have a book or a graphic novel, that 99% of the world doesn't know anything about it, and trying to get them to invest in something they don't know anything about is really an uphill battle. So my goal is to get my book into as many libraries, because unlike selling my book to one person at a convention, one person reads it. If I can get a library to carry my book, at least like 10 kids will read it, right? And so my book is the loss leader for book 2 and book 3 and book 4. It's the commercial for the fall for the series. So book 1 is there to promote the rest of the series, which is still up here. I'm still working on it. But that's my thinking. I'm getting as many libraries to carry it, so that when I come up with book 2 and book 3 and book 4, there will be kids out there who already are familiar with the characters and with the property. So
especially with digital, because the physical, you're kind of limited to where that library is located and the people who live near it. But digitally, millions of readers are going to be able to find your stuff.
Right. My book is also available on Library Pass. So.
Excellent.
So anyway, so if that's it, unless anybody has one more question, we'll close it out. Thank you very much, Jameson, for coming out. And
absolutely.
I hope I see you again. Are you going to go to ALA in Philadelphia?
More than likely, yes. I did submit one panel. Haven't heard yet if it's going to get picked, but yeah, more than likely I'll be there.
So hopefully I'll see you there.
Excellent.
If anybody, I think I think Jay's near Philadelphia, so you should definitely try to go. Aren't you in like Baltimore or something?
No, I'm in Cincinnati.
Oh, I thought you were in Baltimore. My bad. So anyways, again, let's give a nice big round of applause to Jameson for coming out.
Thank you. And I'm looking forward to Omar. He was in attendance. Him and I are going to be on a panel at Fan Expo San Francisco in a few weeks.
Awesome.
Do you want us to follow you on Instagram or anything like that, or what's the best way?
I am not on Instagram at the moment. I probably will be at some point. But I'm on Facebook. I'm on Blue Sky, and I'll probably be adding Threads and Instagram here soon. So, but Comics for All. So Comics, COMIX, 4, the letter or the number 4, and then all. So you should be able to find me.
Okay. Some announcements before we shut down. On the 26th, we're going to have Kristen Sora, who is a former comic book colorist and now a children's book illustrator. She will be our guest, and she will be talking about her career. She's doing golden books. Anybody remember those golden books?
Oh, yeah.
I can't believe they're still around. When I saw her books, I thought, they're still publishing these things.
They're
Well,
still
well,
around.
yeah.
They're still around, but they fall apart. So
Yeah.
it's not the same
Yeah, I
book.
wasn't gonna say anything, but when you it looked like it was just sealed flat, right? I was
Poor
afraid to
binding.
Yeah.
crack it
Well, they
open.
have a spine, very small, but a spine.
And then if you are local, on December 12th is our annual holiday party. So I'm not sure if anybody here is local to New York. The group originally started out as an in-person group, but after COVID, we've been doing more and more virtual. So I apologize for anybody who's not able to make it to New York on December 12th, which is Thursday. And it'll be, if you want to come out, you're welcome to. For the first time, it'll actually be at my house. Usually
Oh,
I rent space for it, but this year we're actually moving houses, so the apartment, this one is pretty empty right now. Perfect place for to have a party. Like if you look at me behind me, there's nothing here. I'll put out a couple of chairs probably, and I think that's it for the year. I know I have a couple of people who want to speak. That's probably going to be happening in January, and also I'm thinking about doing a mini writing retreat in December, but again that would be a local thing because you would have to actually show up for that. So again, thank you everybody for coming out. Jameson, hope to see you again soon.
Yes.
And thanks everybody for coming. This will be online in a week or so.
All right. Thanks so much, everybody.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.